one of my favorite coaches of all time, favorite people of all time. Doing an incredible job right now with CBS college basketball coverage, does games. He's in studio. He's doing commercials. No telling what else he's going to do after this, but just happy to welcome in my guy, Jay Wright, right now, who's covering a lot of NCAA Tournament. Jay, GQJ, what's happening, my man?
Hey, my man. Good to be with you, Jimmy. How are you, buddy?
I'm good, man. I'm just, living in your shadow like I always did before when I covered you. So that's it, man. How's things, man, with you right now? The transition over from the coaching, the sidelines to now in studio and the games. You're doing a phenomenal job as well.
I appreciate it, buddy. It's a transition, man. It is, but I'm enjoying it. And I miss those little meetings we used to have in that little coach's room at Madison Square Garden before you do our Big East tournament games, talking serious ball. And now I listen to you doing the games on CBS and the tournament. You're doing a great job, man. But I'm in the studio now, so we're both on the media side. We've gone to the dark side, brother.
I know, man. But do you find the coaching, you had a challenge? You could kind of formulate a game plan, get your team together, recruit the right people. It was some stresses with that. But now that you're on the other side of the media, there's two things I want to ask you. One, the transition part for you seemed very seamless in regards to you're just a natural behind camera. But since you're just removed from coaching, you have friends, that you coached against now that you have to critique. Okay? So walk me through kind of both of those mindsets of now transferring over, but also the critiquing side of some of your coaching brethren.
Yeah, two really interesting points, Jimmy. I appreciate you saying I look comfortable behind the camera, but one of the things I've looked at and observed in doing this new career is, it's a lot more work and preparation than I knew. Like, you guys used to show up for games. We'd sit there. As I said, I remember us having great conversations back in the coach's room before a Big East tournament game, talking ball. And I didn't realize what went into that, like how much film you were watching to do that. I just thought we were two guys talking ball because I was in that basketball coaching world and we all thought that way. So in the transition, I'm still learning and I'm trying to find my way. And I think you do a great job of this on the air of, I watch a game and I want to get so into the X's and O's, but I want to find a way to make it enjoyable for somebody watching, just to learn little pieces. They don't need to hear me analyzing, the difference between drop coverage and blitzing a ball screen and why they switched it up every time, but try to understand it in some way. So I'm learning on that end of it. The other part of that, Jimmy, which has amazed me, is working with the play-by-play guys that you do, or being in studio, working with, an Adam Lefko or an Ernie Johnson or an Adam Zucker, or an Ian Eagle or Brad Nessler, like how talented those guys are, how amazingly intelligent they are, all the stuff they have going on in their mind. That's blown me away. And in terms of critiquing my coaches, I'm trying to find a way to get across to fans that, coaches do make poor decisions sometimes, but it's not from a lack of intelligence or preparation. It's like, for example, in the Illinois game against Connecticut, I just know Brad Underwood, and I haven't asked him this, but I know for a fact, and I heard his interview at halftime, that he told his team, hey, we are going at Donovan Clingan. We are going to attack him. We are tough. We are aggressive. We are physical. We are going to go at him. And in the first half, it really didn't work that well, but they were only down 5. And I think he went in at halftime and said, you know what? If we get him a couple fouls, it's going to take away their aggressiveness. We're going to keep going at him. He knew that if that didn't work, it was going to get bad like it did. He knew that, but he had to make a decision of how am I going to motivate my team and what's our best chance of winning. If they would have got Clingan in foul trouble, they would have had a chance to win. But Clingan was just too good. I mean, I've never seen a defensive performance like that, and it didn't work. So it made Brad Underwood look bad. And I hear people saying, like, why are they doing that? Like, why don't they shoot some pull-ups? Why don't they start shooting more threes? Well, yeah, he knew that, but he made the decision, and he'll live with the criticism, but he believed in his team and he had to make a decision. So I'm trying to find a way to get that across to people that the guy's not dumb. He's taking responsibility as a coach that he's got to make tough decisions. And if they don't work, he'll take the hit.
You know, it's interesting that you say that, because I talk to a lot of people too in regards to game planning. They're like, well, why wouldn't they switch here? Why are they playing drop coverage? And I say it's hours of scouting and putting together a game plan. And it's a reason why you go in there with option A, this is how we want to guard the pick and roll at the beginning of the game. Option B and option C. Just a little bit from a coaching philosophy for you. When you laid out a game plan, say you were playing against Seton Hall and they had bigs inside and you were a little bit smaller, even though you had the game plan, when did you transition? I don't know, sometimes the games will dictate something different. And even going into tournament games where as teams you had to turn around the scout really quickly.
Yeah.
How did you make those adjustments? What went into that when you had to veer off of what your original game plan was?
Yeah, great question. It's something like early in my career as a head coach, I thought, if you remember Pat Riley with the Knicks, like I learned a lot from Pat Riley, and I liked that, you know, they were going to hard head pick and rolls. That's what they did. They were going to be great at it. You were going to have to deal with it, and they were going to just keep doing it better and better and better, and they were never going to relent, and they were going to do it their way. And I started that way, but he was doing it with Patrick Ewing. He had one of the best centers in basketball, and it worked for them. But as I transitioned and got more experience in coaching, I started to realize we had to have our teams prepared for a succession of adjustments. So just as you mentioned, we would go into games with, all right, this is how we're going to play pick and roll. But we know if we're going to start by blitzing pick and roll. But if they start splitting us and kicking out for threes, then our next adjustment is going to be we're going to switch pick and rolls. So our team knew what the progression was before the game, so that when you're in the game, they don't think it's a panic like, oh, shoot, we're blitzing pick and rolls and they're beating us. What are we going to do now? Like they knew, like, okay, this might happen. Same thing with playing a post player. And we played Zach Edey, you know, when he was a sophomore, and it was like, okay, we're going to start. Sometimes you would do it this way. Sometimes you do it like, we're going to mix it up on him, whether one way works or not, because we just can't let him see the same coverage every time. Coming out of timeouts, we're going to blitz him. But during any other part of the game, when the ball goes in the post, we're going to attack him, which means swipe at his dribble, get back to our man. So we were always a team prepared for adjustments, so that when we did make the adjustments during the game, it wasn't like our team felt like we were panicking. They felt like we're prepared for this, and this is the way we always play. So, and I go back to that Illinois, and I think this is a great conversation, Jimmy, and I'd be interested in your point on this, because I know you know the Big Ten so well. I think Brad Underwood came into the game saying, we're going to get this big dude in foul trouble because he is the key to their team, which I think he is. And I think they got to halftime. They didn't get any fouls on him, but they were only down 5, and it was close. And I think he said, you know what? Let's stick with it, guys. Let's keep going at him. Maybe we get him 2 quick fouls early in the second half, take away his aggressiveness. And they tried early in the second half, and it just blew up on him. And then once it blew up, there was nothing they could do. You know, and I know people probably criticize him, like, why'd you keep going at him? But I think he felt like this is our only chance to win. I'd rather give us a chance to win and maybe get blown out than just hang around and keep it close, but never give us a chance to win.
No, Jay, I agree with you from that perspective because, as you know, during the course of the season, Donovan Cleveland would pick up some fouls and have to be regulated to the bench. Now, UConn plays a little bit differently, but I think he's grown a little bit where he didn't pick up those cheap fouls, 24 feet away from the basket in the pick and roll where he reached in. So now, game planning wise, even though they went at him, he playing straight up in the air, not trying to block everything, but intimidating in the middle. And I think that kind of threw some things off game planning wise, thinking that maybe Samson Johnson would be in the game at times more so than Donovan Clingan, and that didn't take place. But from your perspective, too, when you look at where we're at in the Final Four right now, kind of people figured UConn all year, Purdue, but come on, North Carolina State, and also now you got Alabama. I mean, how great of a story on both sides of the ledger, especially the NC State story, is what they've been able to accomplish.
It is, man. It's so cool because, as you said, you got the two giants and that have really been dominant in college basketball all year. And I got to admit, I mean, as a fan, I've always wanted to see this matchup. I wanted to see UConn against Purdue. That's one side of it. But then the other part of it as a fan is you love these stories, these Alabama stories, these NC State stories, and they are stories, as you mentioned, because the NC State dream here, it really, if you were alive in '83 and you remember that Jimmy Valvano run, that was so incredible because they were in the same position, and Jimmy V was just such a character, and they were doing it in such an incredible way. Like, they were out of games. And if you remember, they were down like 5 against Pepperdine, and Jimmy V just started fouling with like 2 minutes left and they missed free throws. They were out of it, but their run was just as improbable. So because of that, no matter what I see in NC State, I cannot count them out because there is a magic that happens at this time of year. Villanova did it. Villanova was an 8 seed in 1985, an 8 seed, and played the first round in Dayton against Dayton and was out of the game and came back and won it. So in the first round, you're like, all right, Villanova's eliminated. They were an 8 seed. They shouldn't have been in the tournament anyway. And came back to beat Georgetown in the national championship game, which was as dominant with Patrick Ewing as UConn looks right now. So I know enough not to count out NC State and not to count out Alabama. But the Alabama story, too, Nate Oates is a guy that I have communicated with because if you remember, Javon Quinterly transferred from Villanova to Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
And we were helpful in that situation. It was just a good move for Javon. And Nate was great with him, and we tried to help him get eligible. So we worked with Nate on it, and we become friends. And I know talking to him during the year, he's like, I got to get these guys to defend. Like, we're a great offensive team, but I got to get them to defend better. And what you're really seeing with them is a coach that has never given up on trying to get them to defend. And even into the tournament, kept trying to teach them and demand of them, where in the game against Grand Canyon, they held Grand Canyon scoreless for the last 4 minutes of the game. And really, in the Duke game, their defense was the difference. They held Duke in the 50s. So this is a great story of a coach that never relented and continued to demand of his team to defend while they were one of the best offensive teams ever in college basketball.
No, I love the storyline between that and also the Purdue perspective because, and I'm going to relate this to you and your career because you had success, but then you had some number one seeds, some teams that got eliminated early. It was some questioning around whether you could win the big game or win the big moment, and then you were able to break through. Well, that's the same kind of case that we're looking at with Matt Painter, from the perspective of what happened last year, but also the narrative of the big moment, the big game he can't get through. Outside looking in from you when you finally made that break, when you look at Matt, because there is a similarity, what would you say to Matt in regards to going into the Final Four?
You're so right. I hate to, I like to talk about the other teams. I hate to talk about us. I don't like talking about myself or us, but you're so right about that comparison. We had 2 years in a row, Jimmy, as you know, because you were there with us on the Big East tournament, where we were a number one seed 2 years in a row. In 14, I believe it was 14. You help me if I'm wrong, but we lost to Connecticut in the second round, and Connecticut was like, I don't know, man. I think they were like an 11 seed or something like that. And we lost in the second round. They went on to win the national championship. The next year, we were a number one seed again. We might even have been the number one overall seed. And we lost to NC State, who was an 8 seed in the second round. And at the time, you don't realize it, but when you're in the middle of it, I felt like everybody was just killing us. I felt like everybody was, and it probably wasn't as bad as I felt it at the time, but I've actually talked to Matt about this. You feel like everybody just thinks you stink and you can't coach, and they criticize the players and you're losers. And it was 2 years in a row. In 16, we went to play Iowa in the second round game, and I feel for Matt, because I felt like the whole season of 15, 16, and we would talk to our team about this, to everybody else, that whole season didn't matter. And we won the Big East championship regular season. We actually lost in the finals, like similar to Purdue, in the Big East tournament. But nobody cared. I felt like nobody cared about anything we did they just wanted to see us get to that second round game and get past it. That's all anybody cared about. And our second round game was in Brooklyn, and we played Iowa, and Iowa was this hot team, one of the best offensive teams in the country. And I'm telling you, honestly, I was nervous as hell going to this game. I was acting in front of my team like it was no big deal. But I remember seeing my president before the game, and my president saying, I have never been so nervous before a game in my life. He said, I don't really care if we win or lose, but I just want everybody to get off your back. And the amazing thing to me was our players had no fear. Ryan Archidiakono was a senior. Daniel Chefa was a senior. They had no fear at all. It was kind of like Brian Dutcher going into the UConn game saying, I'm intimidated. When I watch film, I'm intimidated, but I know my players aren't. And I found the same thing with our players. They went into that game. We were up 30. We were up 30 in that game. Our guys were so confident, so aggressive. But once we got past that second round, it was like the weight of the world was off our shoulders, and we could just play. And every other game after that was so enjoyable and gave us a freedom, a mental freedom that allowed us to win a national championship, I think. So I think going through it, getting past the second round, actually gave us a clear mind and a freedom on a path to a national championship that I think Purdue is enjoying right now. And I think it's going to be amazing. Hope, there's a fan in me wants to see that matchup against UConn.
No, the fan, I think the national public kind of wants to see, because you got so many intriguing storylines. UConn going for 2 in a row, hasn't been done. 07, 08, and I don't want to talk about that because the first one, Florida beat my Ohio State Buckeyes. So I kind of hold a grudge on that one. But then you have 2 centers which is an anomaly in the NBA, but in college, they're 2 different kind of centers, but yet you utilize them as the anchor to your defense, but also can run offense through them. Matt Painter trying to break through. I mean, there's so many little intriguing storylines. And to your point, too, winning is not easy, even though you're the favorite. Game planning, is there what's the mentality when you get, because I missed the Final Four, I got to Elite Eight, but when you're in the Final Four from a coaching perspective, do you tune into things you've done all season? Are there different tweaks? Or is it just who you are and you just add to it depending on who you're playing?
Great. I think the last point, what you said, what I have learned this year doing TV is I go in, we do a Saturday game for CBS. I go in on Friday. I get to watch both teams practice, which I am loving. But I'm getting to see the inside, and coaches are really opening up to me and telling me what they do and why. And I'm realizing like how nuts I was because I only knew one way. I only knew my way, and I was a lunatic. But And I realize how good all these other guys are also. But my way and our way, I think, was a little unique in that when we were in '09, when we went to our first Final Four, I think I made a mistake in that when we were businesslike all the way through. Final 8, we beat Pitt on a Scotty Reynolds shot at the buzzer. We get to the Final Four. I don't think we were thinking we would get to the Final Four because we had to go through UCLA, Duke. Pitt was number 2 in the country. When we got there, I felt like it was a celebration. I wanted everybody to enjoy it. I invited all the former players, everybody that ever coached with us. I invited everybody to be a part of it. I let them be in team meals. We did our scouting sessions differently. But you know what? Honestly, it was a clown show. I mean, when we got to the game, I felt like, you know what? We didn't stay focused enough. So in 16, when we went, it was lockdown, man. It was just next game. When we went from Final 8 to Final 4, nothing changed. It was just our next game. Let's keep getting better every day in practice. Get to the site. We're on lockdown, not spending any time with our families, not spending any time. No alumni around. We're going to ask everybody for our privacy. It was just next game. And to your final point, it was, what's the opponent? What do we have to do to win this next game? Let's make the adjustments. Let's prepare, and let's be dialed in. And that's the way we approached it, which in 16 and 18, that's what we did. I think I made a mistake in '09.
Gotcha. The learning aspect of it, too. And before I let you go, I was fortunate after the Big East tournament, I run into you outside the hotel. You walking down the street. I got a cigar outside smoking. Father Donnelly ends up coming up, and we're talking. But I posed this question to you, and I think it's very important. A lot of people are trying to get their arms wrapped around NIL and, the transfer portal. And I asked you this question. I said, how do you build culture in today's world with those two opposite ends of the spectrum things going on with NIL, with, the name, likeness, and image and earning money, but then now transfer portal, whether that's young freshman or grad or whatever it may be. And I ask you, how do you build a culture in today's environment?
Yeah, it's fascinating, and it is everybody's challenge right now. And I think the 4 teams that you see in the NCAA tournament and in Final Four right now have found their way to build that culture in different ways. I think NC State's came about right at the end of the season. I saw a statement that DJ Burns said where he said there was a point at the end of the season when everybody started to come to meetings on time. Everybody started to be more dialed into the scouting report. And as you know, as a player, that's culture. When everybody's doing that on their own and everybody's committed to that, that's culture. I think Connecticut had it all year. I think UConn had it all year. I think Alabama is digging into it on the defensive end at the end of the year. You can lose culture too. Some teams that were good all year might have lost culture at the end. But to answer your question, I think you've got to, similar to the NBA now, I think you've got to get an older core of players that join you as a staff, as teammates in building that culture. I think your best players, they've got to be paid in a way. They've got to be committed. That they're being paid not to just perform on the court, but be committed to the culture and help you pass down that culture to the players that are coming in and help you find players in the transfer portal that will fit the culture and help them stay committed. Very similar to the NBA, Jimmy. You were that guy that, all right, you're the highest paid guy. You're the leader. You've got to help us build this culture. You've got to stand for the culture, not just your personal accomplishments. Hard to do, but I think it's the way you've got to approach it this now in college basketball.
Yeah, man, it's totally different. But the game we love is going to be played this weekend. I mean, 4 teams kind of vying for something, some history to be made. If UConn is able to repeat, it could be history for those teams who win it for the first time, as far as Purdue and Alabama. And North Carolina State, the storyline is just unbelievable. But listen, man, you're doing an awesome job, a great job. I'll see you in Phoenix. I'll be watching, of course, Studio Show-wise, and then maybe in the summer with our crew, because you got me hooked up with Marion before. Our crew back there in Philly had to make a special appearance to see if we can get together this summer as well.
We'd love to have you there, man. We love when you come to Philly and play.
All right. Appreciate you, Coach. Thanks a lot, man. Safe travels to Phoenix, too, brother.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.